If you couldn't already tell from the content I've made thus far on this channel, I am a huge nerd. It's not just limited to one topic either. I nerd out on a variety of things, like literature, video games, music, and a lot more besides. The passion I'm channeling for this video, though, is a bit different from my other interests, because it comes from my love for Star Wars. I've loved Star Wars ever since I was a kid, and I've always had a singular candidate for my favorite character of all time, Boba Fett. Something about this quiet, mysterious bounty hunter was just so interesting to me, despite his limited screen time in the actual films themselves. I know I'm not alone either. The massive increase in interest from the show The Mandalorian proves that a masked, morally and ethically dubious bounty hunter can make for a wildly interesting character. Not to mention that Boba himself actually also appears in this series, but we'll talk about that a little later. Needless to say, Star Wars is in a pretty bad spot in terms of its current perception right now. Casual consumers don't seem as interested in Star Wars, while the more dedicated fans seem to get increasingly critical and outraged with every new bit of content that releases. The catastrophic failure of the sequel trilogy under Disney's ownership has caused many to lose hope in the ability of the Star Wars franchise to consistently tell compelling stories. My goal today is to weave the yarn of how my favorite character, Boba Fett, along with his own story, fits into this ongoing narrative. Before I get too far into it though, thank you for watching, and I do hope you enjoy. Our tale begins in 1978. The first Star Wars movie, titled A New Hope, had released the year before to uproarious success. Already, many people had bought into the Star Wars story hook, line, and sinker, and they were ready for what came next. Some executives scrambled to give these voracious fans something to hold them over until the release of the much-anticipated sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, which resulted in the holiday special, which was almost entirely horrible and unwatchable. Seriously, don't watch this thing, it's terrible. The reason why I bring it up, however, isn't because of the special itself, but because of a short animated film hidden within this accursed abomination, in which the character of Boba Fett makes his first ever appearance. In the short, he gains the trust of Luke and his friends, while they search for the crashed Millennium Falcon and Han Solo. It turns out that Boba was a bounty hunter working for Darth Vader the whole time, and as the crew figure this out, Boba makes a hasty exit, blasting off into space with his jetpack. Boba's next appearance would be in The Empire Strikes Back, where he is, once again, working for Darth Vader and the Empire. In an iconic scene, Vader has a bunch of bounty hunters lined up as they get a debriefing on the mission they've been hired to do. As he's explaining the job, Vader stops in front of Boba, points at him, and says, "No disintegrations," to which Fett replies, "As you wish." We learn so much from this scene about what kind of character Boba Fett is. Even amongst such an unruly and vile bunch of villains as these bounty hunters, Vader felt that it was necessary to tell Boba specifically to tone it down a bit and not disintegrate anyone. This shows that he is a cruel and shrewd man who is willing to do whatever it takes to bring in his quarry. Before I continue with this story, I think it would be appropriate here to talk about Boba's appearance. He is outfitted in the armor of the Mandalorian culture, the culture from which Boba hails. The Mandalorians in Star Wars canon are a proud race of warriors whose sworn enemy is the Jedi, and their armor reflects that. It is made out of a metal known as Beskar, which is famously resistant to lightsabers. Their armor is also kitted out with several tools meant to engage the Jedi from a distance. Cords to tie up and entangle, a jetpack, knee-activated rockets, and a flamethrower, to name a few. Boba is also rarely seen without his trusty EE-3 carbine rifle and his iconic green and red helmet, which bears an ominous dent on the left side. This dent, along with the tattered state of his armor, says a lot about the kind of dangerous work he does. Oh, and those ropes going down the right side of his chest plate, they aren't ropes. They're actually the braided scalps of Wookiees, likely from previous bounties. Yikes. Even before we know that much about him, we can already tell that this guy is no joke, and clearly Vader trusts him enough to hire him for the important job of tracking down Luke, Leia, and the rest of the fledgling Rebel Alliance. Of course, getting Luke and Leia is Vader's goal, but we come to learn that Boba doesn't really care about them, except for the fact that capturing them was the only way to get to his real target, Han Solo. See, Solo had defaulted on some sizable payments to the outlaw Jabba the Hutt for whom Han actually worked for a time. When Jabba finally had enough, he contracted Boba to bring Han in, though Han would escape capture over and over again, much to the bounty hunter's chagrin. As it turns out, Han Solo would end up being the only stain on Boba's record and legacy as a bounty hunter, since Boba was likely the best hunter in the galaxy at the time, and boasted a very high success rate. He ends up finally catching Han Solo in Cloud City on the planet of Bespin, where he is frozen in carbonite and handed over to Fett by Vader. The movie ends with Boba loading Captain Solo into his ship, the Slave One, a ship which we will be discussing later, and heading straight to Jabba's palace to deliver his bounty and claim his reward. If you thought Boba might have a pretty significant role to play in the final installment of the original Star Wars trilogy, The Return of the Jedi, then you'd be sorely mistaken. The only thing Boba does in this film is get his jetpack accidentally hit by Han Solo, which causes the jetpack to misfire, sending Boba into the side of Jabba's sail barge and ultimately into the gaping maw of the deadly Sarlacc, killing him. Regarding this uncharacteristically goofy death for such a beloved character, George Lucas himself said, quote, "In the case of Boba Fett's death, had I known he was going to turn into such a popular character, I probably would have made it a little more exciting." It's worth noting that although many people theorized and wrote stories about how Boba actually could have survived his fatal fall into the belly of the Sarlacc, the official Star Wars storyline from that point onwards considered Boba Fett, the infamous galactic bounty hunter, as dead as a doornail. This isn't the last we see of Boba, though. He appears also in the prequel trilogy, where it's revealed that Boba is an exact clone of Jango Fett, who was also a bounty hunter and his father. Jango died in the Clone Wars via beheading by the Jedi Mace Windu, which spurred Boba into an intense hatred of Jedi that would last his entire lifetime. Boba's armor is also just Jango's armor repainted and refitted, and his ship, the Slave One, was also inherited from his dad. There are also certain episodes in the animated Clone Wars series focusing on a young Boba Fett, as he tries to find his way in the galaxy as a bounty hunter, just like his father. Besides these, though, his fate remained at the bottom of the Sarlacc. That is, until 2020, when The Mandalorian Season 2 on Disney Plus revealed the exciting news that Boba was, in fact, still alive. I remember clear as day sitting down to watch Episode 6 of Season 2, and nearly doing a backflip when I saw Slave One for the first time in live action since the prequel trilogy coming into land. Not to mention when Boba goes scorched earth on some stormtroopers after he finally is reunited with his armor. Mind you, this particular moment in Star Wars isn't just cool. It's also the culmination of nearly 40 years of speculation and anticipation. I mean, this guy was pretty safely assumed dead for 40 years. Think about that. Star Wars fans likely lived and passed away without ever knowing that Boba Fett really did make it out of the Sarlacc. That makes this particular moment really cool, at least to lifelong fans like myself. At the end of that season of The Mandalorian, it was announced that Boba Fett would be returning in his own show titled The Book of Boba Fett, and let me tell you, I could not have been more excited. My favorite Star Wars character, who I thought was dead, isn't only still alive, but he's also getting his own show? I about had a heart attack. In 2021, the show finally released, and that's where the title of this video sadly comes into the spotlight. I was forced to watch on helplessly, as my favorite character was dismantled and massacred in real time as a result of a show which was decent at best with some cool moments, and downright awful and nigh unwatchable at worst. To get the compliments out of the way, it was really cool to finally see exactly how Boba escaped the Sarlacc, and certain characters making an appearance was a welcome addition. Plus, the arc with the Tusken Raiders was actually fairly compelling. That's about all I have to say positively, though, because this series does something absolutely unforgivable. They made Boba Fett the most ruthless, callous, merciless, shrewd, and dangerous bounty hunter in the entire galaxy a big softie. A total wimp. I mean, he's straight up useless in a lot of his scenes, getting beat up by just about everyone under Tatooine's twin suns. Where was the Boba Fett from Mandalorian Season 2? Where's the Boba Fett from The Empire Strikes Back? Well, he's certainly not to be found here, that's for sure. This Boba Fett lets other people do his dirty work for him, particularly loitering delinquents riding hovering Vespa scooters that apparently max out at 15 miles an hour. You know what scene I'm talking about if you've seen this show. And the thing that really doesn't make sense is his whole rule with respect mojo that he has going on. Boba doesn't care for respect as much as he cares about honor, something his father, Jango, really emphasized. You don't become the best bounty hunter in the galaxy with respect, but rather with fear. People used to be afraid of Boba Fett, but the way his character is written in this show, there's absolutely zero reason to fear this pushover. Honestly, I expected the other bounty hunters to be terrified that Boba could survive something as lethal as the Sarlacc pit. It just doesn't seem right that Fett would have crawled out of that disgusting creature after having been abandoned by his allies and suddenly had a peaceful change of heart. If anything, he should have gone on a vindictive rampage, which is what I thought the show would be about. Basically, if you've ever been a fan of something that ends up getting absolutely destroyed and disrespected by its creators, then you know exactly how I feel about the treatment of Boba Fett as of late. Oh, and one more thing just as an aside, a personal gripe, if you will. Boba's ship is called the Slave One, a fact, and I do mean fact, that Disney would love to have everyone forget. They've tried rebranding it several times to Boba Fett Starship or Boba Fett's Fire Spray class gunship, but real fans know that its name is the Slave One. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I fail to see how the word slave is enough to make it so offensive that they need to scrub it from their record, but alas, here we are. And that takes us to now. Disney has done absolutely nothing to patch up this massive writing misstep, instead letting it fester, not unlike how Boba was left for dead in the Sarlacc pit all those years ago. And that's really sad. There are so many epic stories that could be told about this legendary bounty hunter, yet those stories aren't getting told. Instead, Fett's been relegated to fan service bait, making cursory Easter egg style appearances such as in the Jedi Survivor video game. I hope Lucasfilm and Disney come to their senses and write a compelling story about Fett, but until then, we're stuck with what we were actually given, which was horrible. That being said, I think if Boba can fight his way out of the Sarlacc, there's probably a pretty good chance that he could make it out of whatever garbage he's been put through recently. The Star Wars fan in me just can't help but be hopeful. And that about does it for this video. If you like what you saw, why not consider liking and subscribing? It really does help out the channel a ton. And let me know what you thought in the comments. I'm Philip, this has been On Thin Ice, and as always, thank you for watching.